Welcome back, everybody. It is the 4 o'clock hour here, Business Monday at GoLocal. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We had an all Charlestown lineup this morning with Nicole O'Malley and Jane Murner Senecal, talking about everything from music therapy to the leading composting farm in Rhode Island. I want to thank them again. Let's talk business. Forget what the Dow's doing. Forget how gold's performing. Forget the inverted bonds. Yeah. It's all about the money, man. Cha-ching, Gary Sasse. Gary, how are we doing today financially?
Well, this is really irony. We're doing okay. Yet last month or last week, the leading economists projected whether we'd move into recession in the next 12 months. And they believe there's a 35% likelihood we'll move into a recession. That's up from July, which was about 30% felt that way. And yet, the economy is strong in some ways. There's a strong labor market. There's good consumer demand. The stock market's a little bit volatile because we have a president that speaks before he thinks. And so, it is an irony that most of the learned people think there's at least more than a 1/3 chance we'll go into recession, and the fundamentals don't say that. And yet the public confidence in the president's ability to lead the economy is really tanking. The latest polling data that we have shows that still a majority support the governor's economic program, but
the president's
program, sorry. But the numbers now, 49 support it, 46 do not support it. A year ago, it was 50% supported, 34 opposed it. And just a month ago was 51 supporting it and 41 opposing it. And so it's almost 50-50. It's within a margin of error. So there's a bit of decline in confidence. And most of the decline in confidence results from self-inflicted wounds. So I don't think we've ever quite seen anything like this. The last couple of times we had recessions, you knew why. There were bubbles. We had in 2000, there was a dot-com bubble. In 2017, there was a housing bubble. And sometimes recessions happen because they become self-fulfilling prophecies. And I think this president is, whether he likes it or not, is moving us into a recession. Because of unpredictability, because of undisciplined behavior. Today I was told, I hadn't heard this, that he called for 1% rate reduction by the feds. Presidents have always pressured the feds subtly. They've never attacked the feds publicly. And it's causing tremendous uncertainty in the business community. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Because business doesn't know what to do, and if you're
let me just play devil's advocate on one. Maybe presidents should have challenged Greenspan a little bit more than they did, and been a little more. Listen, we're in a different era. Over periods of time and change, I'm not defending it. I don't think that quarter percent cut did anything other than to lose flexibility in the future, but. You're going to hold them to be responsible for the monetary policies of the country?
The Fed was created, I think, in 1916, and it was created to be an independent branch. The president made the appointments, appointed the chair, Congress approved, and to the extent that you can't take politics out of politics, that's true. And various presidents, for the 100 years the Fed's been in existence, have let the Fed know what their thoughts were. Sometimes the Fed was intimidated. Sometimes the Fed ignored the president. At the same time, when a president speaks up, he or she, her comments or his comments, have impacts on business decisions, which can adversely affect the economy. So in the case of President Trump, if he thinks the Fed's policies are wrong and he keeps on criticizing the Fed publicly and starts a brouhaha with the Fed, business will lose confidence. So there's all kind of very sophisticated ways for an elected official to deal with an independent body.
Are you implying that President Trump is not always as sophisticated as he might be in dealing with the nuances of management?
I think President Trump is the least capable president we've ever had, and that includes James Buchanan and Warren Harding. I don't know how else I could define this guy. But yeah, and so you see certain things, happening. There was a message that was sent by global investors just recently on their willingness to invest and the inverted curve. Businesses stopped investing. Investing has slowed down in capital. Something called the non-residential index, non-residential spending is way down. Manufacturing has been down for the last 5 months. And so the question is why? And I keep on coming back to that environment of uncertainty, unpredictability has been created. Just the president's on again, off again, managing of the whole tariff question, the whole trade question.
But also, we've been in the longest recovery in the history of the U.S. economy. I mean, isn't it bound to have a recession, and artificially continuing to extend it through tax cuts and other maneuvers only may have the potential of aggravating the length and the depth of a recession?
Well, that's true. God is the only person that can outlaw, economic cycles. So yeah, that.
Listen, I remember 99-ish, 98, 99, when Clinton was president, that there was this viewpoint being pondered that we wouldn't have recessions anymore. Things were so good. We'd cut the deficit. We'd done all these wonderful things to manipulate and manage our economic policies that we might never have a recession again. Well, that didn't work out so well.
But the point being, you can't outlaw economic cycles. They
Right.
can happen.
It's going to happen.
The recovery is going to. But what we are noticing right now is that there are a bunch of policy connects that you don't have to make unforced errors. The economy and the invisible hand is going to take care of the economic cycle. You don't have to worry about that. The object of your political leadership, the people you elect to manage the economy, is not to make unforced errors. And let's talk about, there's so many unforced errors being made by this administration that things are becoming more problematic. Because I think we can all agree on this. The United States is not in a recession right now. There's no way you can say we're in a recession. It's very possible that even with a change in the economic cycle, we can avoid a recession, but the chances today of having a recession are greater than they were 2 weeks ago.
Let's go to the political aspect of it. It's very easy for a person to say, I don't like Donald Trump in a vacuum, correct?
Yes.
And then there's an alternative. And what is the alternative that the Democrats are putting forth that is going to make Americans, independents, conservative Democrats, liberal Republicans, wildly comfortable with their selection opportunities in the next presidential election? Would that be Bernie Sanders? Would Bernie Sanders fall into that? I'm going to make middle America comfortable.
Well, Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth
Harris.
Warren.
Yeah, no, that's you define the problem. What?
And also, Republicans are great at destroying Democrats.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah. In presidential elections.
But
Ask Willie Horton how's that worked out.
yeah, but and you define what the real problem is, and the Democrats are very much in a position of snapping defeat out of the jaws of victory, because this guy is not very, very popular. And you have to weigh that, some of the policy issues, against some of the governance issues, and the attacks on the press, disrespect for the rule of law, racism.
I'm going to give you all those things. Charlottesville, racism. But let's just go to, there are 10 Democrats now going to be on the stage in September, I believe, is the next Democratic primary presidential debate. Which one of those is in the best position, A, to convince Americans that they are better at managing the economy? That would be who?
I think, well, I'm not going to mention names, but I think...
I want you to mention names.
I'm not going to
This
do
is
that.
a mention names kind of show.
I
The money man is fading under pressure.
No,
He is so wealthy that he can just get on his private jet and fly away. What kind of...
Not fading under pressure, but it's awful early for me to mention Democrats that would do well.
I'll give you... Name 4 names.
I have no trouble naming 4 names.
Name 4 Democrats who are going to be on that stage that Americans will feel more comfortable that they can manage the economy.
Okay, well, I think Amy Klobuchar is one.
Is she still on the stage?
She's
Okay,
still on stage. Bennett from Colorado is another.
Okay, there's two.
Delaney from Maryland, who no one knows
Is he
about.
still on the stage?
He's still, well, he's not on the stage. And I think Americans would feel more comfortable with Joe Biden than they would Donald Trump.
Okay.
So those are four.
So does Amy Klobuchar and
Listen,
Bennett have any chance under God's green earth of being the Democratic
I'm
nominee?
not going to handicap this because let's see what happens. A lot of water is going to go over that dam.
It's hot and humid out there.
It's hot and humid.
It's hot and
It's
humid.
hot and humid. A lot of water's going to go over that dam. But the point you're trying to make in your way, a little redundancy here, is simply this, that the Democrats do not seem to be inspiring, confidence in the candidates they're putting forth. And yet, on the other hand, I don't believe these polls, but there are polls that come out which show every one of the Democrats from the far left beating this guy. The Republicans need to wake up and smell the coffee.
Are you a Scaramuccian?
I'm not scared of anybody.
Are you a Scaramuccian who wants to see the Republicans replace Donald Trump as the nominee of the Republican Party?
Yes, and I think there are several people that...
Bill Weld?
No, Bill Weld made one mistake. Bill Weld... Well, Trump's going to get the nomination, so let's talk about that. That's over with. What you can accomplish as a Republican by running a credible candidate in the primary is have an impact on ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really much more important than people think because of the crazy ideas coming from the extreme left. So there are Republicans that could get into that game and do that.
Are there any likely? You live in
Well,
that Republican world, Marco Rubio and all of the
Marco's
other.
not going to do it, but
Why shouldn't a Marco Rubio run?
Why shouldn't a Marco Rubio run?
Yeah.
You have to ask Marco Rubio that question. Marco Rubio is up for...
Aren't you his Svengali?
Well, Marco Rubio, is obviously not going to run. You have to find somebody who, feels that if they run, they'll be able to put up ideas, and they're not going to get hurt by doing that. And Mark Sanford. Now you can criticize Mark Sanford. I know about his personal problems. We'll go from here. He can't be elected president, but can he run in a primary and siphon away 10 or 15% of the vote and force the party to talk about options to Trump, which may impact the party? The answer is yes. Now, will he announce? I don't know. I think that's a real possibility. I think you'll know in about 10 days whether he does or doesn't.
Former governor.
Former governor, former congressman. He had a personal picadillo.
Or two.
Well,
or three.
I know about one. You may know about others. But which certainly was a mistake. But considering that he's running against Trump, who's also
got like 52 personal picadillos.
Who's also experienced with that,
Right.
But I think the important thing is obviously they control the party. The party has become a cult. It's not a political party. It's a cult of Trump. In this state, they're fighting right now, or maybe they're not even fighting, as to whether or not they want a winner-take-all primary or have a proportional primary like we've had for a number of years. But if Sanford gets in, or somebody that's articulate, can get around to key states, can talk about ideas that are really important to the nation and important to Republicans, on what is the option to Obamacare, what do we do about these deficits, what kind of regional trade policy should we have, that can be helpful, number one, in moderating Democrats, because you are on the other side putting up ideas that are serious, and second, moderating the party itself. So I must be the extreme optimist, because not 9, but 99 out of 100 people will say that's not going to happen. But there are different Republicans, talking about that. Weld is trying it. I don't think he's the right messenger because of his past experience last time running as a VP for another political party. I know that Sanford is giving it very serious consideration. Right now, I don't know what his decision, will be. Certainly, if he gets into it, unpleasant things about his past will be brought up. I don't know if he wants to go back through that again.
Let's go to the recession. Recession hits, let's just say, 12 months from now. Does Rhode Island take impacted harder than the rest of the country?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know this, that in trying to assess that, you have to ask really one very simple question. Okay, what have you done to shield yourself? What have you done to protect yourself from an economic downturn? And and this is a very personal observation, I look at the things that we've invested in, that we've prioritized during the recovery, and it's a lot of tax incentives, a lot of tax credits, a lot of real estate. And some of that real estate was necessary because you compete with other states and you have to do it. But I don't think the program's been balanced enough. So I don't know if we have built enough cushions in to deal with the next recession. And you look around and say, okay, if there is a loss of jobs, if unemployment starts going back up, what's the nature of the Rhode Island workforce? Are there areas that we can get hurt? Well, we're not going to get hurt manufacturing because there's very little manufacturing here. We will get hurt where it's been happening for a while in some of the service industries and some of the retail industries, and don't know if we've spent our time wisely in building options for the areas that naturally get hurt during a recession. So I'd be concerned. I would think the old story years you heard in Sunday school about the squirrel that was during this good time was sparing his nest and saving him, and he didn't go hungry in the winter, and the other squirrel was out having a good time. We've had a good time with real estate.
Let's jump over to the world. This is right up your alley.
Oh, yeah.
Let's throw the dice out on the table. Boston's Encore facility. Listen, Rhode Island's been blessed for more than a decade that the other gambling facilities in New England that have come online, whether it's Plain Ridge or MGM up in Springfield a couple years ago, Foxwood and Mohegan Sun expansions and their financial problems has really never hurt the facilities here in Rhode Island. Now Encore opens up in Boston. It's a first-class facility by all estimations, and it seems to have taken a big bite out of Twin Rivers' revenue stream. For its first 6 weeks, did more than $250 million in coin in and about $50 million in revenue. It's the real deal. I've not been there yet, but by all indications, and from a range of different people, from casual to serious to people who just went there to be voyeuristic, that has a significant impact in the long term on Rhode Island's revenue stream, because the lottery revenues is the third largest in-state revenue source. Obviously, the federal government is larger, but it's sales tax, personal income tax, and lottery are the three big.
Yeah, but when you put all the business taxes together, the lottery's actually, gambling's actually the fourth. But it's one of our major revenue sources, no question about that. But yeah, this is the first time, as you pointed out, where the gambling or the gaming industry, as like they call themselves, in Rhode Island is facing very uncertain times. Mm-hmm. And it's facing uncertain times in two regards. So the first regard is what's happening in Massachusetts. And don't ignore Connecticut, because there are people ready to invest in Connecticut and expand in Connecticut. So just in terms of how much gaming the market can bear, competition's getting a lot better. And then there are also tremendous technological changes that are going to happen in the business. And I don't claim to understand what these technological changes are, but how and where you locate a machine and the return on that machine can have a big impact on state revenues, and that's changing very quickly too. And so, yeah, we're in trouble. This year's budget, I think, includes about $413 million, from gaming. About 75%, about $310 million, is generated by the VLTs at Twin River. Another $20 million is generated by the table games at Twin River. So it's about $330 million of the 413 or 15 million that we're going to get that comes from Twin River. If you just follow the 1 month's trends, and 1 month doesn't make a trend, so I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm not doing a forecast, but I want to use it by way of example. If you lose 10% of that money, which is what's happened over the first month. Actually, it's more than that. Twin River, revenues fell 34% in July. VLT game table revenues VLT is about 17%. So let's take 10% as a nice round, number, everything else wiped in. If your budget's predicated on, $310 million from VLTs at Twin River, and you lose 10% of that, that's $30 million. If you lose 10% of your table gaming revenue, that's another $1.5 million. And so you could easily lose, I could see a scenario where you can, lose 8% of your gaming revenue, drop from about $415 by $30 million to about $385. And then there's another issue which has been, I think we just use figures where I don't know where they come from, is online gambling, sports betting. We were going to generate $23 million last year.
We were supposed to. We ended up with 6.
Yeah, and now we got 22 or 23 built in. Now some of that includes more online sports gaming. I'll believe it when I see it. So I think that's a soft estimate.
Well, and Governor Baker made a big point at the end of the budget season to say his goal is to get Massachusetts to adopt sports betting January, February at the latest. So if our estimation is we're going to do 23 million in our second year in sports betting, that certainly did not take into account Massachusetts going online. I also think that number is extremely high. There's no indication that we were ever going to meet that in the first year. Clearly the reports that they had depended on said those things actually as well. And we still don't have implemented mobile sports betting, which I think is the only chance. But if Massachusetts goes online, I don't know what you're going to cut the number by, a third, half?
I don't know, and I guess we'll know if the mobile sports betting goes online. It's supposed to go online in September, so they have another month to get that online.
Right.
I don't know what
So that's a quarter
progress.
behind.
Well, that one I think was programmed September, but that's but the point being, and this was the bigger lesson, which people didn't listen to because times were really good for a long time, as you pointed out. You can't be depending upon gaming unless you're Nevada,
Right.
to finance government. Everybody that's financed government and thought gaming was going to come in and be the savior, was wrong. Atlantic City, just the gaming revenue that's produced by our lottery, the tickets, the Powerball, the Keno, those games, that's going to produce around $60 million a year. Well, $60 million on a budget of almost $10 billion, or a general revenue budget of $4 million, is not a big percentage. And so it takes time, but the roosters eventually come home, and the more you depend upon gaming revenue to balance budgets, the less fiscally realistic you are now. And we're going to be facing that. This time it's not something that's going to break the entire budget, but because our budget is a deficit budget, because big out-year deficits projected, because this year's budget, the operational budget, wasn't really balanced. It was deficit budget. It was balanced by the use of one-time, revenues. We can't afford to take hits in any revenue source, and I think we have to watch gaming, very closely. The conditions have changed. The situation has changed, and we could have some potential liability. So it should be of concern to everyone, not just the company, not just Twin River.
As we have moved past the Johns Hopkins report, jump over to schools in our last few minutes, we've seen some blips of attention to the issue. There's going through the process of the state formally taking over from the city of Providence. But have we lost momentum on this issue, or are we on the verge of it, or is this the summer break, or is there enough constituencies involved? We had a piece last week that the parents in Providence are not a party to the selection of the next superintendent in Providence. Seems to be a huge mistake. I think all the indications are, listen, if you're going to make a change in Rhode Island, I don't care if it's schools or tax codes or any major reform in Rhode Island, it's always taken a lot of constituencies to get behind it and build a big coalition. Business, parents, etc. Are we going to lose this opportunity? Are we going to waste another crisis?
So I took a pledge, and it's the 11th Amendment.
The 11th Amendment?
The 11th Amendment is to give the new regime a chance.
How long is the chance?
Well, my chance is, well, it fluctuates. You know, you make judgments at each stepping point. The first chance is the first 90 days, and the first 90 days is to give the new regime an opportunity to put in place what the organizational structure will look like. It's easy to sit here, you know, after a month and voice concern. It's easy, the points you make about lack of parental involvement, which I think is a serious mistake. You know, the question of, you know, urgency in the middle of August. And so before one reaches a judgment, let's see how it's reorganized. Let's see what happens. Because keep in mind, this is the last, I shouldn't say the last, but this is the best chance we've had, you know, based on, you know, other efforts that we've made. So to be prematurely critical, not even, or I think is not helpful. And so I'm going to wait the 90 days and see what happens.
Do we need to balance, though, prematurely critical with watchdogging the process?
Oh, no. We need to watchdog the process. And I think what's so sad about this right now is there's a couple of things. These are political observations, and I guess I can make political observations.
You're the money man. You can do anything you want.
Well, yeah, but sometimes you want
You can buy the Providence school system. You can probably get it pretty cheap right now.
It's not worth much. But in watching, you know, this, you want, obviously, you know, community involvement. We'll see what the community involvement looks like when the final plan comes out. But you talked about watchdogging, and I lost my train of thought there for a second. That's just counting my money. I had a chance to think. But that's what the city administration ought to be doing. See, there are actual, in the city administration, people who used to be responsible for the care, control, and management of the schools of Providence. They're no longer responsible. The state has come in and taken it over. They've acquiesced. They put up no fight at all. They acquiesced.
Rolled over.
Yeah, I don't think Buddy would have rolled over quite the same way. So they rolled over, but that doesn't mean that their obligation, their responsibility has vanished. And so their responsibility and obligation now becomes one of being that watchdog. And so if there's a serious issue right now, or not a serious issue, but a concern about how the restructuring, the takeover is going, then the school committee and the chairman of the school committee ought not be hiding its light under a bushel, but ought to be saying, wait a second, you know, we're representing the people of Providence, and you're listening to them. This is what we think you ought to do. You know, the mayor ought to be speaking that, you know, he thinks this is the greatest thing since popcorn. But sometimes all the kernels don't pop, and he ought to point out which kernels are not, you know, are not popping. So yeah, there are people that are responsible to be the watchdog. We have a situation in the state right now which is very interesting. I thought the Hopkins report was fine, and it was interesting reading. It wasn't a kind of quantitative report.
No.
And so
and it didn't have recommendation, unlike the Ted Eddy, Dan Challoner report of 92 or 93.
Yeah, it essentially was, I don't want to say anecdotal report, but they told a story.
Right.
And they told a story through anecdotes and cases, and et cetera. You may have been able to extrapolate that and reach conclusions. Some cases maybe you reached the wrong conclusion. But that was the kind of report. It painted a picture that there was something amiss in the Providence schools. And the political power structure, the elites came in and said, we have to fix it. No one in the communities were talking about this kind of fix. It came strictly from the top. It came from 12 business guys that kicked in $100,000 apiece, who worked, you know, with the governor. And that's all fine and good. They met their obligation, but their obligation didn't end there. Their obligation also is, if they're going to work, if they're going to be honest brokers in this change, is to constantly talk about it, put out newsletters, say this is what's happening. This is, you know, not interfere with the commissioner who has a tough job to do to get the thing fixed up, but they have a kind of a watchdog oversight, you know, role since they brought us to it. And simply, you know, writing a corporate check for $100,000, which isn't all that difficult, you know, financing the study and going to Paris for the summer, is not going to create the kind of sense of urgency.
I smell a little jealousy there, Money Man.
No, that's what Buddy. Remember, Bruce and I were involved with the city, and then Buddy started the garbage strike, and he accused Bruce of going to Bailey's Beach and he's heading to Europe for the summer. And so,
Which you probably did.
I did actually.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I was in Europe that summer. But anyhow, so I think the issues you raise are fine. But I think we got to follow my 11th commandment. But that doesn't mean other people don't have responsibility.
Well, Money Man, you're going to be on next week. We're going to give her a free pass till next week. Then you're off for 3 weeks.
3 or 4
When
weeks.
when you're back, her honeymoon is over.
Well, I think the Get Well plan that she put together, when did she say she would have the restructured plan in place?
There have been a number of dates, and then a number of public dates and a number of private dates. We'll give her all the way to the end of September. As kids are coming back to school on September 3rd, there's been no issuance of a new safety plan. There's been no issuance of a new education training program. There's been no issuance of a new facilities plan either. So that's 3 areas that the Hopkins report said were wildly deficient, and none of them have been publicly addressed.
Well, leadership is important, and there's one key decision that's better made sooner than later, and that's the appointment of the actual operating officer, the actual superintendent that the commissioner appoints. And this kind of search, this search has been going on now for a couple of months, I think.
I would say so. I believe it is further along than that, and I believe that there's been, we hear that there's been lots of activity.
Well, hopefully that decision will be made and be made publicly pretty soon, and I think that will then begin to generate that we're taking steps to address it. Because the biggest problem, like in most public situations, is leadership.
Mr. Moneyman,
My
thank
pleasure.
you as always. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow. Kate Nagel will be back in the afternoon. Lots brewing. We're going to have an update on Ira Magaziner's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein tomorrow. New information from the Clinton Health Access Initiative. And you can see that on GoLocal tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.